Dillian Whyte versus Ivica Bacurin. Now, before I start this video, I should say the opponent wasn't an opponent he'd necessarily look good against. He was a blown up cruiserweight. He was much smaller than Dillian Whyte, and he didn't really come to fight. You know, he didn't throw a lot. His game plan seemed to be based on keeping distance and running from Dillian Whyte, and then, you know, trying to smother, trying to spoil, and trying to close down Dillian Whyte and hold him up close. So, you know, before I'm slightly critical of Whyte's performance, I've got to caveat it by saying the opponent was an experienced, tricky opponent who didn't seem to have too much ambition, and most guys wouldn't have looked good against him. Having said that, having seen this fight, I'm still of the opinion that Dillian Whyte is very, very raw, very green in the ring. And I have to question if Dillian Whyte and his team have learnt the lessons that they needed to learn after that Anthony Joshua fight. After the Anthony Joshua fight, I look at Dillian Whyte and I think, what does he need to improve upon in order to become a world-class fighter? And for me, I think he needed to improve his conditioning. I thought he needed to improve the construction of his punches. I thought he needed to work on his finishing, and I felt he needed to stop being so wide, stop being so flailing, and be a bit more clinical, a bit more precise with his punching. And I've got to say, all of those concerns that were in my head following on from the Joshua fight were very much on display tonight. Dillian Whyte weighed in at a career heaviest for this fight. You know, I thought his punches were very, very wild indeed. And when you're throwing wild overhand punches, long looping hooks, that sort of thing, it gives your opponent longer to see it coming. The opponent, who wasn't a world-class fighter by any stretch of the imagination, was just able to sort of move in, move out, and stay out of range or smother the work by getting in too close and avoid a lot of Dillian Whyte's punches. You know, it's actually interesting how few punches Dillian Whyte was able to land in the early rounds of this fight. His punches, again, I've got to say they were poorly constructed. You know, sometimes you see him throwing an overhand, and I'm going to exaggerate it to prove the point, but he kind of throws it and almost brings it down. It's almost Derek Chisora-esque, actually. You know, very poor punches. And I've got to say, his finishing in the fight was, in the 6th round, almost comical. And, you know, that was something that let him down in the 2nd round of the Joshua fight. Most people, including myself, believe a world-class fighter would potentially have stopped Joshua in that 2nd round. And here, you see Dillian Whyte really hurt his opponent in the 6th round, and that opponent was ready to be knocked out. And you see Dillian Whyte quite literally sprinting across the ring and throwing huge punches that are more sort of in line with the kind of things that you'd expect to see outside a pub on a Friday night, as opposed to in a professional boxing ring. And that inaccuracy was wild throughout the whole course of the fight. You know, very, very inaccurate. And as Dillian Whyte steps up in levels, you know, that sort of inaccuracy is going to lead to him being countered. Those sort of wild punches are going to lead to opponents with more speed throwing straight punches down the middle and catching him. And I think there's a lot to work on for Dillian Whyte. You know, possibly even more so than I thought after the Anthony Joshua fight. You know, it was a real testing fight for him, and hopefully he'll have learnt a lot from it. You know, I think this is the 2nd longest he's ever gone in a fight in his entire professional career. So, you know, it's good for him to get those rounds under the belt. It's good for him to return. It's good to see that, you know, seemingly his shoulder is holding up. But I've got a bit of concern about Dillian Whyte, you know, at this stage. As I say, the conditioning, the construction of his punches, the finishing, and I just could see him, you know, if he's not very, very careful and if he's not making adaptations to his game pretty much immediately, you couldn't necessarily see him becoming a Derek Chisora style fighter. You know, there's so much long punches from the back of the hall, so much looping punches, and so little in the way in terms of, you know, technical defensive boxing. For me, it's just a little bit of a concern. So I don't want to be too down on him. Return fight, got some rounds in the bank. You know, proved his shoulder was good against a tricky, experienced opponent. You know, but a lot to work on for Dillian Whyte. He stops the guy in 6 rounds. He gets the win. He gets the comeback. Credit to him for that. But for me, he looked very sloppy in there, and he looked more like a Derek Chisora with a bit of power, as opposed to a world-class fighter for my money. Let me know your thoughts. It'll be very interesting to see where Dillian Whyte goes next. He's certainly an entertaining fighter. If you've enjoyed this, hit the thumbs up. If you agree or disagree, comment below. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Many thanks for watching, guys.